My name is Sarah Miller, and I'm the Senior Policy and Advocacy Network Advisor here at Child Care Aware of America. I'm so excited to have Lorrie and Kristie help us out with tonight's webinar. But before we get into the meat of tonight's webinar, I just wanted to go over a couple of quick housekeeping things. The first thing is, if you have any questions throughout tonight's webinar, there should be a questions box on the right-hand side of your screen. Feel free to type questions in there as we go, and we'll be sure to have time for questions and answers at the end of tonight's webinar. We'll do our best to get through all of the questions, and we'll be sure to provide contact information if we are unable to get through all of the questions. Another question that we have seen a lot of coming in is just asking about certificates of participation for tonight's webinar, and those will be automatically sent out to those who watch our live webinar for more than 45 minutes tonight. Those will automatically be distributed on Friday. Right now, I'm going to hand it over to Lorrie, and she's going to start our webinar. Lorrie?
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, whoops. Can everybody see the screen?
Yeah, we can see your screen.
Okay, thank you. Sorry, it's not the right screen. I'm terribly sorry. Something just clicked and it's the wrong screen. I can't do anything. My screen is locked.
Okay, I can pull them up over here. Not a problem.
Okay, you're going to have to. Thank you. Okay, I have the screen now. Whatever you did, I now have control of the screen. Shall I just go with it?
I've got it pulled up here if you just want to let me know when to click through the slides.
Okay. Thank you, everyone. I'm really sorry for that little glitch. We're working remotely tonight from 3 different sites, so please bear with us. I'm really glad that you're here to talk about this very timely issue. Never leave your child alone in a car. It's a heat stroke campaign that we're working on at Safe Kids with partners all over the country to make sure that we raise awareness and let parents know and caregivers know what they need to do in order to keep children safe in cars, particularly in the sunny, warm months. Next slide. The definition of heat stroke is that there's an elevated body temperature due to failed thermoregulation. Heat stroke occurs when the body absorbs more heat than it can actually discharge. When the elevated body temperatures are high enough, heat stroke is a medical emergency and requires immediate treatment to prevent disability or death. So how does heat stroke affect children? While it does happen to children, it also happens to adults, but it's much more rapid and much more severe in children. They have less sophisticated thermoregulatory systems. Their bodies heat up 3 to 5 times faster than an adult body, and the child's body can't cool itself as quickly. At 104 degrees, major organs begin to fail, and that's body temperature of 104 degrees. And then, unfortunately, death occurs at about 107 degrees. So where does heat stroke occur? One of 2 places. It can happen in the car, and that's the one we're going to talk about tonight, but also at play with athletics and heat exhaustion. And it's important to make sure that children are hydrated when they're playing outside in the heat and you notice that they're sweating and doing other things that maybe they get dizzy and they forget to drink, and that's what adults need to do, is make sure that those kids remain hydrated. So heat stroke symptoms present where the child's skin is dry, red, hot, as blood vessels dilate, and that's the attempt of the body to discharge that heat. The child can have nausea and vomiting, headaches, low blood pressure, fainting or dizziness, and the child may suffer seizures. So this is something that you want to keep an eye on if a child's been playing or has been sitting in the car for a long period of time without air conditioning. You want to make sure to look for these symptoms. So why is heat stroke important? It's the leading cause of non-traffic vehicular deaths to children. And, you know, just since May of this year, we've lost 23 children to heat stroke in cars. And since 1998, 582 children across the United States have died. That's one child every 10 days. And unfortunately, while we know the antidote to this, it is 100% preventable, it's something that happens that oftentimes the caregiver or the child's parents are unaware that it's happening at the time when it is. So how fast can it happen? 20 minutes is a deadly period of time for a child, and within that 20 minutes, the car's temperature inside can rise almost 30 degrees. So if you have a very hot day outside, you might have an outside temperature of 85 degrees, but you may have temperature inside the car of 109, 110, whatever, depending on how long the child has been in the vehicle. And what we want to make sure is that parents know that you can't leave a child alone in a car even for 1 minute. It's not safe to run into the 7-Eleven to pick up a gallon of milk. It's not safe to run into the dry cleaners, because what we've seen in some instances, parents get in there, or caregivers, I keep saying parents, but it's caregivers too, get inside and they get distracted and they start doing other things. They run into neighbors, they might shop for additional things. And we've heard of people going into malls just to return something at the first store and spending 45 minutes to an hour in the mall, forgetting that they left the child in the vehicle. So how does it happen in cars? Well, about 52% of the time, the child is forgotten by a caregiver. And that means that for whatever reason, the child may have been sleeping in the back seat or is just quiet in the back seat when they arrive at a destination. The parent climbs out of the car, locks the car, and goes on and does their errand or goes to work and forgets that they left that child in the vehicle. Oftentimes that happens when the driver is with a new routine. Maybe they don't typically drive and drop off at daycare, and for that one day the routine changed, and for today they're supposed to drop off and they forget. And I'll bet there's not one person on this call that we're talking to tonight who hasn't driven past an exit somewhere when they got distracted, or has forgotten something and left it in the car when they arrive at their destination. So this is something that can happen to anyone, and 52% of the time when these children have been have had heat stroke in the vehicle, it's because they're forgotten by a caregiver. 29% of the time, it's children who are playing unattended in a vehicle. And sometimes people leave their trunks open. I have a friend who used to leave her trunk open with cases of water in the back for her husband to carry in when he arrived home from work. She doesn't do that anymore. Or parents who leave the doors to the car open and kids climb in to play. They're comfortable in the car. This is a friendly place for them typically. And they climb in, they close the door, and they don't recognize that there are childproof locks in the back. And we need those childproof locks. They're an important safety feature. But for a very young child who's in the vehicle, they don't know to climb to the front seat and get out of the car that way. Typically, they become overcome by the heat, and then they are found in the back seat of the vehicle or the trunk. And then 18% of the time, kids are left intentionally. And that's what I was just talking about earlier, where people go into a store. We've had people go into casinos. We've had people who are returning library books and get inside and get distracted that way. So sometimes they're left intentionally by the adult who doesn't have daycare. They go out and check the child every hour or two, hoping that they can entertain themselves while they go to work. So we don't know all the circumstances of those kids that are left intentionally, but we know that in about 18% of the cases, it does happen that way. So what you can do as a bystander, because we don't want to just give you this information and then expect you to not act on it, we want to make sure that you tell people and for yourself to call 911 immediately if you find a child unattended in a vehicle. You don't know whether that child's been in the car for 1 minute, 5 minutes, 20 minutes, or an hour. So better to err on the side of caution and have the bystander call 911. The operators for 911 are trained to ask questions and to ascertain whether the vehicle needs to be in any way broken into. That doesn't just happen automatically, and they will send help to the vehicle. You have to recognize that the 911 operator knows exactly what to tell you to do, and you should follow their directions and their next steps. And, you know, people are really hesitant to call 911 for things, but this is a very good thing to do. And if it turns out that it's a false alarm, we've heard many times from first responders that they don't care about that. They're very happy to make that call and perhaps save a child's life. So we shouldn't worry about making the wrong call on that one. The data that we use is collected by a gentleman by the name of Jan Null. He's a certified consulting meteorologist. He has an excellent website, and you'll see that listed on the screen here, www.ggweather.com/heat. And Jan Null is actively involved in this. He eats, sleeps, and drinks this issue. And if you hear of an issue in your community, he would ask that you contact him and let him know. There is no national database that collects this information apart from his. And he gets his data from NexusLexis and from people who send him the newspaper articles, the contacts that he gets from the people around the country who notify him as soon as there's been an incident in their community. And you're certainly welcome to join that group. If you hear of anything in your community, please let him know so he can follow through and help gather those statistics that are so important to all of us working in this field. So why does our work matter? These are some of the children that have been left in vehicles unintentionally by their loving, caring relatives. And I have to tell you that we hear very nasty things said about these parents sometimes, and it's so unfair because these are loving parents who made a very, very dreadful mistake, and they've paid dearly for it. So these are the happy, smiling faces of children that we keep in front of us all the time as we're working on this issue to remind people that this is something that is preventable, and we want people to know what to do in their workplace and at home when they see something like this happening with kids left alone in cars. So we need you. We want to work with you. Kristie's going to talk to you about child care and how this is very prevalent among parents who have difficulty remembering to make that stop at child care. And but we need you as spokespeople. We need you to educate parents. We need you to be those bystanders who make the call if you should see a child alone in a vehicle. So we have a national perspective. Safe Kids has worked very aggressively with the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration and with others around the country, other statewide organizations and national organizations. We feel like it's a big tent. It's a big problem. We want to make sure that no child dies this way. If it's possible that we all work together to make that happen, that's exactly what we want to do. And so our CEO blogs on a regular basis and is doing a number of satellite radio tours and media tours in order to get the word out about this, this very preventable injury and death. So on July 31st of this year is National Heat Stroke Prevention Day. This is the very first time we will be doing something on a national level all across the country. And what Safe Kids Worldwide and NHTSA are asking people to do is to be partners in this. And for a full day between 10 a.m. and 5 p.m., we want you to actively tweet once an hour if you can using the NHTSA.gov site and with the hashtag of heat stroke. Hash mark rather, excuse me. And go on and check out some of the blogs and know that there's a media tour going on. There's also going to be a presentation that morning on Good Morning America by David Strickland, who's the head of NHTSA. So please realize that this is a big day, first time ever done nationally, and we want you to be part of it. So our local efforts, Safe Kids works on the local level with our coalitions across the country. And just in the month of June, I wanted to give you an idea of what happened in Safe Kids coalitions. There were 89 evaluations that were completed. That means that there were 89 programs going on just in the month of June in 33 states. And they did public awareness. They talked about it at checkup events. They Facebooked. A number of coalitions had messages that went out over Facebook, and they shared messages on that page. They did media interviews, both by radio and television. They talked with parents and caregivers at daycare centers, in church groups, with scouting programs. They did other media types of things with magazine interviews and newspaper articles. So know that this is bigger than one or two people working on it. This is a national effort, and we'd love for you to join us. You'll notice in the picture that's on here a truck, and outside the temperature on top is 88.4 degrees, and underneath what the temperature is inside the car, 118 degrees Fahrenheit. This is a moving display that we have that goes around to events around the country. And we have it located in a few different states, have access to this. And we share this freely so that people can really get a sense of how hot it is inside that vehicle. Cracking a window does nothing. It does not help to dissipate the heat fast enough to help a child. So we have toolkits, materials, press conference ideas. We have an online speakers bureau. If you feel that this is an issue you could talk about, and could be a part of our rapid response if something were to happen in your community. We have, through our communications department, a rapid response kit that goes out that provides you the most accurate information to be able to do a really good little radio interview or a TV interview or a newspaper, speak with a newspaper reporter. And if you'd like to be part of that, you have my email address, which lwalker@safekids.org. will be available to you, and we would love for you to join us in our efforts. So we work this all year. We don't just talk about it when the sun is out and when it's hot, because parts of the country, Florida, Texas, California, have heat all year round. And our message, never leave your child alone in a car. Remember to act, and that's an acronym that we use: avoid heat stroke, create reminders, and take action. And some of those reminders, we want people to put their cell phones in the back seat, put their briefcase back there, anything that reminds them to open that back door when they get to their location so that they remember that they've got a sleeping baby in the back seat. We do want to keep talking about technology. There is technology that is developing rapidly. Right now, what we do is funnel those ideas onto manufacturers. We recognize that even if the best solution was found today, old cars are on the road for 20 years, and it could take a serious long time until every vehicle is equipped with the technology. So the best thing that we can do is this awareness type of education right now with every family, with every driver. You don't have to have a child for this to impact you, and particularly in child care vans, and there's some technology there that I think Kristie's going to talk about tonight. Social media, we'd love for you to blog. We'd love for you to share the posts on Twitter and on Facebook. And this is just a slide that we sent out last year through our materials for our people on the Safe Kids Speakers Bureau and Rapid Response. But 7 kids died in 1 week. Actually, it was 8 by the time the slide went out, died in 1 week. Last year, and we never want another week like that. So when we post these on the Facebook page, we'd love for you to share it so that it gets out to all the folks that you deal with too. And as I said, we're in this together. I talked about some of the other organizations. Safe Kids uses the message, never leave your child alone in a car. National Highway Traffic Safety Administration, Where's Baby? Look Before You Lock. Golden Gate Weather and the National Weather Service, Beat the Heat, Check the Back Seat. The Alliance of Automobile Manufacturers, Never Leave Your Child Alone in a Car. Kids in Cars, Look Before You Lock. And For Our Kids' Sake, Caitlin's Law. And Kristie's going to talk to you about Ray Ray's Pledge, which is what she's working on in memory of her daughter. These are the helpful websites for you. And these are all organizations that have materials and messaging. And as you can see, the number has grown. Years ago, it was just 1 or 2 people that were talking about it, and now we have a lot of voices that are screaming about it, and we'd like you to be part of that. So support our local efforts, make families aware. If you could, please participate in the National Heatstroke Day. Educate the families that you interact with. Recognize how often this is child care related. Establish a policy. Become a spokesperson and get involved. Really important for this to spread across the country. And I thank you for your attention. I thank you for your interest in children. And please, join us and make kids safer in cars. Thank you.
So now we're going to hand this over to Kristie, and she's going to give her presentation now.
Hi, Sarah, can you see my screen?
Yep, we can see it.
Okay. Can you hear me okay?
Sounds great.
Okay. Let me get us in slide format now. Okay. So today I'm here to talk to you about our story and our daughter's story. Her name was Sophia Rain Cavallero, and her nickname was Ray Ray. I am Kristie Reeves Cavallero. Together, my husband and I founded Ray Ray's Pledge in hopes of finding a solution to one of the high-risk arenas for child hot car deaths. Our objectives today are to, number one, tell our story, and then talk about the decision to be a heat stroke awareness and prevention advocate. And then lastly, I would like to present to you our call to action on your part. At Ray Ray's Pledge, our mission and our mission statement is to take action to prevent child hot car deaths. So with respect to our story, our child Ray Ray, she was born on May 15th, 2010, and our tale of heat stroke was generated simply by one wrong turn by my husband at the bottom of our hill. On the morning of May 25th, 2011, just 10 days after Ray Ray's first birthday, our entire family overslept for reasons that we do not know. And therefore, the entire house was chaotic in trying to get my child bathed, fed, and ready for school and play with her because she was accustomed to playing before going off to daycare, getting my husband prepared for work, and packing myself because I was scheduled to go out of town for a business meeting that evening. Through the chaos, we managed to get everyone dressed and ready, and I walked with my husband out to his truck, and we placed Ray Ray in her car seat and gave her a hug and a kiss and told her we loved her, and then I gave him a kiss and told him to have a good day, and I waved goodbye to them as they drove off down the hill, and that is what our typical day consisted of. So I assumed that my husband had dropped her off at daycare when in fact about 3 miles from our home at the bottom of our hill there is a traffic light where he would normally take a left-hand turn and then drop her off at daycare and then circle back around and head to his office for work. For reasons that we don't know or understand, my husband made a right-hand turn that day. And it wasn't until I picked him up for a lunch date at about 1:30 in the afternoon that we discovered the error. We discovered the error because we were talking on our way to lunch about how pretty she looked and how cute she looked in her tropical day dress, which had been a gift from her teacher for her birthday. And she was wearing it because it was to be tropical day at school. And my husband started thinking, why didn't the teacher mention her dress and how cute she looked? He just kept thinking that in his head. And then he told me, go back to the office immediately. And I said, why? And he said, just go, turn around, go to the office immediately. And I asked him what was going on, and he said to me quite simply, I can't remember dropping Ray Ray off at daycare. So I immediately turned the car around. I instructed him to call his office and have his office manager check the truck. At the same time, I called the daycare. Once the daycare teacher confirmed that she was not in attendance, I hung up and immediately called 911. Simultaneously, the office manager had removed her from the truck and started running cold water over her body, and the office had called 911 as well. We beat the paramedics to the office, and for about 10 minutes while we were awaiting the paramedics to arrive, I participated in trying to resuscitate our daughter, and despite my best efforts and the efforts of everyone involved, unfortunately, we could not save her, and 1 hour and 19 minutes after my 911 call, my child was declared dead due to heat stroke. So the next slide is titled Picking Up the Pieces, and that's really what my family has had to do, because the loss of our beautiful Ray Ray shattered our hearts into a million pieces. And we've just tried to pick up the shards that were left over that could be salvaged. The news piece that is on this slide represents our story. This is what appeared in our local newspaper. While record-breaking temperatures rose to 100 degrees, a child died after being left in a truck for an undetermined amount of time. It was really hard to read this about your own family and to know that this was your child, and to read the comments from other citizens about what kind of monster my husband was for making this mistake. So obviously, I spent many sleepless nights in the days after Ray Ray's death and the months. And during those sleepless nights, I would research all of these cases. Jan Knoll's website, ggweather.com, became my new best friend. And after a lot of tears, a lot of these sleepless nights, and a lot of research about child hot car deaths, my husband and I learned that our story was in no way unique. In fact, we kept seeing the statements, forgot to drop off at daycare, just like our case. We kept seeing this over and over and over in so many reports. And what we learned is that in the data on child hot car deaths collected from 1998 to 2010 by Mr. Knoll, we learned that more than 1 in 5, that's over 20%, it's actually closer to 23%, of all child hot car deaths recorded during this time frame occurred due to the parent forgetting to drop the child off at daycare that morning. Most commonly, these were children under the age of 2 who were sleeping and or in a rear-facing car seat. So they were out of sight, out of mind. Most commonly, these incidents occurred when there was a change in the child transport routine. But we were staggered by this number. If you think about it, over 50% of all of the child hot car deaths were forgotten by the parents, and nearly half of those were supposed to have been dropped off at daycare. And this percentage comprises, this one single time point of a daily transport represents a time of day that was deadly, almost as deadly as the children who have gained access to an unlocked vehicle. So a very, very high-risk time of day. And why is that? Why is this a high-risk time of day for child vehicular heat stroke? There are a number of reasons to help explain this. We learned that just last summer, 40% of all child hot car deaths involved kids who were supposed to have been dropped off at daycare that morning. And an additional 2 cases involved children who were forgotten in daycare vehicles, comprising almost 50% of all of the deaths last summer involving child care in some way, shape, or form, as Lorrie had previously alluded to. So why the high risk? For a number of reasons, most people are unaware of this risk to child passenger safety. They could never imagine anyone ever forgetting their child in the back seat. Many of you are probably asking yourselves right now, what kind of moron would forget their child in the back seat? And the answer is most commonly a very loving, caring, responsible parent who is also a productive citizen and a pillar of society. What we have found through behavioral research is that stress, either acute or long-term chronic stress, can induce in some cases memory failure in many parents, oftentimes new parents. And just as during your chaotic morning when you're running late for work, you might forget to turn your coffee maker off, you too could forget your child in the back seat of a car, especially if they're rear facing. So no one could imagine this ever happening to one of their children or in their community. And so they really dismiss this risk to child passenger safety and say, I would never do that. Only a monster would do that. And then they dismiss the risk and the danger and just ignore the message. They don't believe it could happen to them. Unfortunately, or the sad reality, is that the majority of child hot car deaths happen to families who are very loving, very caring, and very responsible. So the public perception of where these tragedies lie is very, very inconsistent with the harsh reality of who has to live through these tragedies. Secondly, we have no national and no state morning attendance verification requirements at daycare centers and at preschools. Interestingly, in grade school, there is an absence line. There is an attendance verification requirement for public schools. In fact, if your child is late for school one morning and they don't show up at homeroom, the parents will get a phone call, a text message, an email, and they could get any one or combination of those, wanting to find out why the child is not at school. And these children are in a scenario to where they could, if in danger, most likely ask for help or remove themselves from danger. So when we looked at this, my husband and I wondered, well, why is it that we have all of these requirement verifications for attendance in grade school, yet in the child daycare setting and preschool setting with these tiny, innocent babies who are in danger and whose parents often do not even realize that this is a danger to child passenger safety. They cannot remove themselves from danger. They can't cry out for help. Why is it that we as a society accept doing nothing when a child does not arrive on time? And because of that, what we see is, since there is no morning attendance verification requirement, along with the misperception of how these tragedies happen, a child, once a parent forgets that the child is in the back seat and the parent goes on to work, the child in back, no morning attendance verification requirement, so the whereabouts go unquestioned by the staff. By the time most people discover the error the child is already dead, because timing is crucial. So again, this is a very high-risk time of day. More than 1 in 5 of all of the child hot car deaths recorded from 1998 to 2010 were due to children who were supposed to have been dropped off at daycare. And again, 40% of the cases last summer. That is a very high-risk time of day. A time of day where I, as a parent who have lost a child in this scenario, really ask you to consider to establish multiple layers of security and safety to confirm that your child has been dropped off at daycare. So for us, as grieving parents, we had to take action after learning these facts. And the reason we had to take action is, for me as a mom of Ray Ray, who was my soulmate, to think that her life would be nothing more than a horrible statistic, i.e. case number 4 of 2011, was just unbearable and unacceptable to me. My child's life was so beautiful, and she was beautiful, and I could never, ever live with her short life meaning nothing more than a horrible statistic. I could not survive that. Neither could my husband. So we started looking at ways that would be easy to implement, inexpensive, and readily available for all socioeconomic classes, and would target that morning daycare drop-off time that is established as a high-risk time of day for these tragedies to occur. And what we came up with, in conjunction with Ray Ray's teachers and several of our child safety partners, including some of the folks at Safe Kids, we came up with what we call Ray Ray's Pledge. And again, Ray Ray's Pledge targets those child hot car deaths that occur due to failure to drop the child off at daycare. What we see is that the pledge is very, very, very simple. And we wanted it that way. We wanted something that would be easy for people to commit to doing. We put the primary responsibility for a behavior change on the parents, in that, number one, the parents commit first and foremost that they will change their behavior, and they will start communicating all planned absences or tardiness to the daycare teacher, whereas the daycare teacher and the daycare center commits to being a guardian angel and a safety net for these parents during what is known as a high-risk time of day, and a time when parents who are often stressed and subject to memory failure can be vulnerable. So the second part of the pledge is that the teacher commits that she will call the child's parent if he or she has not arrived by his usual arrival time and a planned absence has not already been communicated. We have also suggested for daycare centers as a method to help motivate parents into a behavioral change, that they even charge a fee for each false alarm call that they would have to make for these children, in the manner similar to what they charge when a parent forgets to pick up the child in the evening, or a parent is late picking up the child. We say that one phone call can save a child's life, because it can. It costs nothing, and it takes less than a minute to do. In the children who are at highest risk of being forgotten, they are less than 2 years of age. And in the state of Texas, the child care ratio for children to teacher at the age where most kids die is no more than 4 children to 1 teacher. So, you know, our pledge is really geared at those children who are at highest risk of dying from child hot car deaths. And we recently took the pledge system online in order to reduce paper. And our website is rayracepledge.com. You can actually click on the site. There's a number of awareness materials that are available for free that can be downloaded and printed on your own, or you can request materials and parent reminder tools from us. And again, our mission statement at Ray Ray's Pledge is we believe that talk is cheap. We believe that we must take action to prevent heat stroke. And we have done this in the past 2 years by an ongoing expansion to multiple communities nationwide as well as internationally. We currently have sites that have adopted Ray Ray's Pledge in at least 15 states that we know of, in addition to Italy, Canada, and England. And we have provided these expansions with numerous educational and reminder tools. We also are very aggressive with a social media and web-based awareness campaign. Our Facebook site is facebook.com/RayRayCavallero. We also have our website, again, which has a number of awareness materials and helpful information for caregivers and for parents. And we also have our YouTube station titled Ray Ray's Pledge, in which we also host a short video on the basics of heat stroke awareness. And in closing, I want to ask all of you today to help us. I need you. Ray Ray needs you. Those beautiful, innocent babies out there who are in danger and whose parents do not even recognize the risk and don't even know that their kids are in danger, they need you too. You can't save my child, but by supporting the implementation of Ray Ray's Pledge in your community, you can save so many beautiful, innocent children who cannot help themselves. And last but not least, I beg of you, if you think that the risk of heat stroke is too small for you to take action, I beg of you, take this picture of my daughter and remember it. One death, even one, is too many in this senseless tragedy that we as a society could prevent. And I thank you so much for your time, and thank you so much, Child Care Aware, for hosting this event tonight and helping to raise awareness of this often unrecognized or misinterpreted risk to child passenger safety.
Thank you so much for sharing your story, Kristie. I now want to open it up for questions to everyone who's on tonight's webinar. As I mentioned earlier, there is a question box on the right-hand side of your screen, and we have a few questions that have come in that I will get to, but if you have any other questions, please feel free to type those into the box over on that side of your screen. All right, so we have some questions coming in here. Let me just read through some of these. Okay, one of the questions here is, will we receive handouts? I do want to note that tonight's webinar was recorded, and we can put tonight's webinar and the 2 PowerPoints up on our website, and we'll get those up by the end of the week. I know that there were a couple people who were having trouble logging in, so they will be able to view the webinar in its recorded form as well as access those PowerPoints on our website. There's a question that came in here. It is, at what age can children legally be left in the car alone?
Well, I'll take a stab at that, and Kristie, I'm sure you've got an opinion on that too. I don't think there's an established age so much as it's when is the child in the position to be able to extricate themselves from a vehicle and be just as safe outside the vehicle as they are inside the vehicle. You know, you can't say that you have to be 8 or you have to be 9 or you have to be 10 because, you know, at what point is it safe to leave a child alone in the middle of a parking lot somewhere? And if you wouldn't leave that child under any other circumstance, it's not appropriate to leave them alone in the car. When the child can get themselves out of the vehicle, know how to get to a sidewalk or away from moving vehicles that are in a parking lot. They have to be able to make that decision based on their maturity level and on their ability to open the car door. You certainly wouldn't want to leave a 4-year-old alone in the middle of a Walmart parking lot. And we know that that happens almost every day. Somewhere children are being left even at very young ages. So it's basically a parental decision. Some states have an age where they've set 10, others set 12, but I don't think there's one particular number. It's really based on what can the child do for himself in an emergency if they needed to extricate from the vehicle.
Great. Another question that has come in is this just as important in cold weather? I know that some of the people who are attending don't live in some of the warmer states, and because they have cold weather the majority of the year, they wanted to know how important this is for cold weather as well as hot.
I can take that, or I can start off with that, Sarah. Interestingly, we have had cases where children have died when the temperature was in the 50s outside, and they've died of heat stroke. So even when you think it's not that hot outside, your car still acts as a greenhouse and still gets really, really hot. It gets hot quickly, and it can get hot enough to be deadly for children, even in temperatures as low as the 50s. We have also had cases, most recently in Oklahoma last year. We also had some cases in Wisconsin where the parent left the motor running and the heat on, and the child died from heat stroke because the heat from the motor and the heating system had radiated and was enough to kill the child. And so those are very, very sad. With respect to a child dying of hypothermia or freezing to death, it's my understanding, and Lorrie, please correct me, but in those cases, I believe that they have a few more hours as far as how deadly the temperature can be, but they are still a potentially deadly scenario. In addition to the fact that your car could be stolen, your child could kick the car out of gear and have a car accident. There have been cases where children have played with the lighters and matches, and even a case recently with a child that found two brothers actually where there was a gun in the car. They were playing with the gun. So yes, this is an issue, I believe, for people at any point in time in the year, even when you think it is not hot.
I concur. Kristie's absolutely right. And there have been only a very few states, maybe 2 states, 3 states at the most, where there hasn't been a fatality. So it's more prevalent in the hot states, but it starts earlier and lasts longer. We've had fatalities in February all the way up through November. So Kristie's right. This is something kids just should not be left alone in cars. It's just, there's no good outcome for leaving children alone in cars for whatever reason. It's just not appropriate, it's not safe, and we don't recommend it at all for even 1 minute.
Okay, a few more questions came in here. One great question that I saw was, how can I talk to my director about bringing this up and educating the rest of our staff during our staff meetings?
Hi, this is Kristie. One of the first things that you could do is to point them in the direction of some of the helpful websites, Ray Ray's Pledge, kidsincars.org, ggweather.com, as well as the Safe Kids website and the government website, safercar.gov/heat. Most people do not really have a good understanding of this tragedy. It's usually an out of sight, out of mind issue. So usually people are more vigilant only when a case happens within their community. And then as the media buzz wears off, so does the awareness. And I just really submit to you to present and give them the options and let them research the materials that are available all for free online through any of these websites to understand that the myth of this tragedy is much different than the harsh reality that these tragedies happen more frequently than you think, and they often happen to very caring, responsible parents who had a very horrible case of stress-induced memory failure. And this could happen to you. I mean, if you take one step back and think about if you've ever left your coffee maker on, yeah, this too could happen to you.
We have a few questions here that are pretty similar. I'm going to try and combine a couple of them. But the first question here is, I'm alone in my classroom in the morning and can't make phone calls from my classroom. How can I help make sure parents get that phone call if not on time? And do you have any policies that we can use as a starting point?
Yes, actually we do. And I would like to remind people that the children who are at highest risk of being forgotten in a car are those children 2 years and under who are often in a rear-facing car seat. Here in the state of Texas, the maximum ratio of kids to teacher for those infants is four kids to one teacher. And I submit to you that within daycare and preschool, safety, your child's safety should be your #1 priority. That is the paramount part of care. And given that most families are paying the equivalent of a second mortgage for child care, we are paying for people to care for our children. And I would also submit that if you are too busy when you have 4 children and one is missing, if you are too busy to make a phone call or to have your assistant teacher to make a phone call on behalf of you, then I would really question whether or not you're too busy to be responsible for my child at any point in the day. And I would, you know, I don't mean to be harsh, but the reality is that these children who are at highest risk, we're not talking about 30 kids to one teacher. We're talking about a maximum of 4 kids, sometimes 5, depending on the state. And you know, that is not a whole lot of children. I mean, I have twins myself here at home, and I just would submit to you that the first priority in child care, you are supposed to care, and I would just beg that you think about the reality of the frequency of these calls, especially if you institute a penalty charge for any false alarm calls.
I want to just chime in here too. I have a number of friends who've now become very active and involved in this, and they also are fearful that they are going to forget their child. One of the things that they're doing is that they've set up a system now where as soon as the parent drops off, they're contacting the other parent, and the other parent is holding them accountable to call them and let them know that they dropped off at school. So it's a parent thing, and I think Kristie's right. We want to have child care centers get involved in that, but it's also parental if they can set up a system for themselves where if it's on the you know, a consistent form of drop-off that they do, the mom, if she drives that day, makes the call to the dad, and vice versa, he calls her. And it's just something that she sets a timer to remind herself if she hasn't heard from him, you know, what's going on, what's happened. She makes the call. So it's something that they're forcing themselves to remind themselves about, and you know, that might be something you'd want to suggest to new parents in particular. Having this baby around, particularly if you've had parents who this is late in life that they've had these babies. They've been driving to work for 20 years, but they're only driving a baby for 3 months. This is something brand new for them, and it's a helpful way to keep that in the forefront, that one of them is responsible for that action. So whatever it takes, I mean, I think Kristie would agree, whatever it takes to make this alive and real in every family and at the daycare centers that you use, that's what you should do.
Great. Those are some great ideas. We have a lot of questions coming in regarding certificates for tonight's webinar. And certificates will automatically be distributed. They'll be sent out over email, I believe, on Friday morning, Friday afternoon at the latest, hopefully. And they're going to be sent out to everyone who has participated in tonight's webinar for the majority of the webinar. We do only offer certificates to those who do participate in the live webinar, but those will be sent out by the end of the week. And there are a lot of questions about accessing the resources page that Lorrie had mentioned earlier, and I just wanted to mention that all of that will be posted on our website, and you'll have access to those slides with those links. So you'll be able to access them at a later time. Just a couple more questions before we end tonight's webinar. Let's see here. Here's a good question. Are there any brochures or printouts we can hand out to parents instead of sending them to a website?
I actually have those available upon request if you submit a request form on raypledge.com. We have short information postcards, and we also provide parent reminder tools such as little car door magnets that go where your door handle is so that you will see it as you depart your vehicle. We also have bracelets as well as keychains as visual reminders for parents, and those are available per request. Kids in Cars also has a Look Before You Lock, Be Safe card that is a very, very good information card. It's available in both English and Spanish, and those are available upon request as well off of the Kids in Cars website.
And Facebook website, you can download information from there also for parents. And I think NHTSA is going to have a special form that goes out for this July 31st event. So we just encourage everybody to get involved in that for that day. So tweet, Facebook, share, do whatever you need to do to get the word out about heat stroke on that day. But please check out the website, and I'm sure you'll be overwhelmed with some of the great information that's out there.
Great. I think we have time for one last question here. And this question is, what is the best way to talk to parents about checking and the importance of calling in the morning?
I would submit to you that you show them the data. Most parents, again, dismiss this if they even hear of this. Prior to our tragedy, we had never even heard of it being a remote possibility that you could forget your child in the backseat of a car. On May 24th, 2011, the day before my child died, if you would have asked me, would it be possible for either me or my husband to forget our child, I'd be like, absolutely not. So a lot of parents are the same way. They've either never heard of this as a remote possibility, or they dismiss it in thinking only a monster, only a horrible parent would do something like this, and it would be a scenario where a parent intentionally left the child in the car. They're not aware of the fact that the majority of these cases occur in very loving, very responsible families who are often very stressed, very fatigued, especially new parents, sleep deprived. And these happen most frequently when there is a change in routine, and the parent who commits the error had a memory lapse. They just simply had a stress-induced memory failure, or they even misremembered. You can talk to a number of parents who have experienced these tragedies and been the one to make the mistake, and they can tell you quite clearly that in their mind they could even point out to you what the daycare teacher was wearing that day. So I would just stress that you shatter the myth and preach to them the reality. And even if that fails, I would submit that we all carry fire insurance and homeowners insurance in hopes that we would never need to use it, because you would never imagine your house catching fire and you losing everything. But we take out an insurance policy just in case. So even if you believe still, after hearing the truth, the reality versus the myth, even if you believe this would never happen to you and your family and your loved ones, take out an insurance policy. Establish these safety nets and delivery confirmations around your daily child transport routines. And in those days and cases where there is a change in routine, for instance, dad's dropping off the child instead of mom, and it's not something dad usually does, add additional security layers and safety nets to that child transport system, because those are the particularly high-risk times of day for these child hot car death tragedies to occur.
Well, I think that we are out of time for questions, but I want to thank you, Kristie and Lorrie, both for participating in tonight's webinar. You've offered up a lot of really great information. And I did want to just remind everyone that the webinar will be posted on our website with all of the information to contact both Lorrie and Kristie through their different slides. But if you do need anything, please feel free to email me. I've got my email address posted up here. But I want to thank everyone, and I hope that you have a great rest of your evening, and we hope you join us for our next webinar. Thank you.